What's up, everyone? In this video I want to talk about a phrase that I hear a lot of people use very often, sometimes in positive ways, sometimes in negative ways, and that phrase is, "This is just who I am." And I hear people use this a lot. I'm sure I've thought about this myself, and I think that I sort of have a love-hate relationship with this phrase, because on one end of the spectrum there are some aspects of our life that we don't have direct control over, such as having a chronic illness or physical attributes that we can't change about ourselves. And it's important to acknowledge those limitations and acknowledge that it's outside of our control, and that can help us to accept them better and adapt to them better without having high hopes or unrealistic expectations that can often lead to more suffering. So saying "this is just who I am" can be important for accepting aspects of ourselves that we can't control. Although I would say that it's important that we don't identify with these limitations, that we recognize them, but we don't see them as we don't identify as just being the limitation. So, for example, I was actually on a forum a couple days ago for bipolar people and people with bipolar, and they were arguing, or someone mentioned that he doesn't like it when people say "I'm bipolar" because it's too identifying. I am bipolar. Instead, we should say, "I am a person, I am a human being with bipolar." So even with limitations and obstacles in our life, we can acknowledge them as aspects of our being, but we don't have to completely identify with them. I'm not just a bipolar person, I'm also a husband and a friend and this. So it's important to recognize that no one aspect is completely who you are. On the other end of the spectrum, people say "this is just who I am" when they make a mistake, when they fail at something, when they have a bad track record with certain habits, but these are habits that they do have control over, but they submit control over them by saying "this is just who I am." They relieve themselves of the responsibility of trying to make the change, and I think that's also definitely a negative way of using "this is just who I am," because personal development is all about changing who you are and going from one stage to the next. And I think saying "this is just who I am" is really misleading and detrimental. I look back on my life and I've changed a lot. I've changed within the past, my whole life I've been changing, and I think 20 years from now in the future I'm going to also be a different person in many ways. So it's important to acknowledge that we are always changing people. We are always learning new things, having new experiences, learning new abilities, and it's important to acknowledge that we are in a constant state of flux. Heraclitus, the philosopher, said, "You can never step in the same river twice," and I think that's also very true for our experiences, that we can never exactly duplicate an experience. We're always changing and transforming in different ways. And that's an assumption made in personal development, that we are changing beings and that we can direct our changes in some way. So I think that there's a lot of evidence that supports the opposite notion of "this is just who I am." So think about how you've changed throughout your life. Think about how you're going to go through more changes in the future, and use that idea of change to take more control of it, to see where you do have control over aspects of your life, and don't just say "this is just who I am" and keep living the same routines and patterns, because you're changing no matter what, and the better you acknowledge that, the more control you have over your life in the future. So think about that, and if you guys like these videos, please subscribe to them. Thanks for listening.